Hey, I'm Mike Squires, and this is the Couches Podcast, episode number 118, with my guest who topped my wish list when I first started this podcast, Nels Klein. I tell this story later on in the podcast, but I got to fact check myself right now because I just went back and I took a picture of the album and posted it on the supporter Instagram page yesterday. And the receipt in the 7-inch that I bought actually said February 1996. So even my story was messed up. My timeline and my story. Doesn't make any sense for me to tell you right now, unless you've been listening to the podcast, but there you go. So anyway, I've been a long time Nels Klein fan. Saw him play with the Geraldine Fibbers. You know, strangely, I've never seen him play with Wilco. I've seen him play solo and other jazz scenarios. And it was an absolute pleasure to have him on the podcast. I've been in a room, I've been within, shoulder's length of him a few times. And just was too nervous to talk to him, which seems ridiculous now that I've actually had a conversation with him. Nicest guy in the world. So hopefully he's got a new record coming out. It's amazing. Duh. And go get yourself a pre-order. Pre-order that thing. There's a link to go buy it in the description of this website. I got mine on order. I even had mine personalized. You can get yours personalized to you. He'll sign it for you. It's pretty sweet. Hopefully we'll get him on a video. That would be amazing. We'll see. I'm not going to hammer him right now. If you are enjoying the Couches Podcast, you know what? Please consider becoming a pledge supporter. You can do that for as little as 99 cents a month over at anchor.fm. There's a link in this description of this podcast, wherever you're listening. Or you can go to anchor.fm and search for Couch Riffs. Or if you're savvy, it's anchor.fm/couch-riffs if you want to remember all that garbage. It's easy. 99 cents a month. You support this podcast. We continue getting amazing guests like Nels and having weird, long conversations about a lot of random stuff. And eventually we end up talking about music always. And guitars and bass and gear and drums and life. Perhaps this is therapeutic for you. Perhaps you wish I'd finish my sentences. Perhaps you'll keep listening. Anyway, thank you so much to all the folks who have already gotten on that and become supporters. I want to thank them right now. So thank you, Ryan Waters, Hayden Smith, Matt Gabbs, Justin Jones. Go check out his guitars. Doug Starkovic, Deja Colantuono, Rochelle Parker, Chris Smith, Adam Pranica, Dan Hurst, James Pope, S.J. Somerset Sullivan, Mike Lacerda, Ryan Hooper, Ryan Crace, Steve Hall, Jamie McParlin, Dan Leary, Geraldine Brunette, Kathy Giordano, Rebecca Pellman, Danny Bland, Soto Rebellos, John Guffey, Teresa Morgan, Rolla Amplifiers, Perry Morgan, Paul Hutzler, and did I get Justice Gash on here already? Some people give money through PayPal for some reason. I think maybe there's a link on my website. I don't know, but it's easier and cleaner because I don't have to pack around a piece of paper plus look at a screen. Anyway, thank you to all these folks. Also, thank you very much to River City Guitars. River City Guitars is a really great guitar store in Spokane, Washington. Tiny little place, packed with really cool stuff. Stuff that you want, stuff I want, stuff we want. I scream, you scream, we all scream for River City. These guys are always buying guitars, amps, vintage, used, and cool stuff. So if you have something that you're looking to part with, drop them a line, sales.rivercityguitars@gmail, or give them a call, 509-818-7693. Tell them Squire sent you. We're friends. Every week I pick something off the website, and I'm jumping ship on what I said in my Monday episode. It only seems appropriate, even though here, what do I know about appropriate? I think that Nels plays a Barney Kessel when he's doing the hollow body, the big hollow body jazz box. But for this episode, I'm gonna go with 1975 ES 175. It's a beauty. What is that sunburst called? That's called I don't know. It's like blonde in the middle and black in the burst. What is that called? I don't know. I'm colorblind. You know this. Sunburst. Is it just called sunburst? This thing is a beauty. Two humbuckers in it. Big old sharp cutaway. You're gonna look cool playing your jazz licks on this thing. You can get this over at rivercityguitars.com. You can tell that I don't know anything about the jazz. But I do enjoy to listen to it, but I don't know anything about, jazz. It's fancy. Go check this guitar out. You can get it for $32.99. They're taking offers. No harm in making an offer. Thank you so much to rivercityguitars.com and my man Bobby Kluss over there. I'm done. We're going to get to the episode now. Thanks for hanging in there. Listen, don't forget the golden rule, right? Treat people the way you want to be treated. I'm paraphrasing, but that's essentially it. That's the gist of it. Don't be a dick. It's not that hard. And imagine what the world would be like if we all treated each other just like that.
Okay.
Welcome back. So I had a recording scheduled last night, and I had to cancel. I was out doing firefighter stuff until 10, and then it's crazy.
So when there's and what's the deal with the power outage?
Well, did you ever live rurally?
No.
Yeah. So
I am now. We had power out when we were before we were where we are now. So it's like at least an hour past the somewhat close to the city line.
Got it. Got it. We looked all, I lived in Seattle for a long time, and that was really my city experience. And it's, it's kind of a city, but
it definitely is a city.
But New York, when people say the city,
mm-hmm.
you always know what they mean.
Right. That's what I've adopted it, even though I am from Los Angeles and lived there for over 50 years.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. But I've been in New York now for over 10 years.
I wanted to ask you, because, you were embedded there.
My dad was from there. It was just everything I knew, really, But I really thought of moving to New York City. The first time I thought of it was in 1976. So it took me a little while to get to New York. I visited with my family in 67 and 68. Mm-hmm. And then my brother Alex and I went in 76 on a kind of jazz pilgrimage. And that was when I thought, wow, it's just like a completely foreign world, but I loved it. And I always will, I'm a total city kind of dude. And this is a big change, but seeing how much my wife is thriving here, and we'll try to figure out nefarious ways to get our friends to move up here.
You know what? It's not that hard, man. It's not.
Well, and wow, it's so much cheaper. Ooh, duh.
it comes with its drawbacks, like it's rare that you would have a power outage in the city for 2 days. That's something.
But also, okay, let's get back to that, because 2 days, we would have I guess the longest when we were in the woods, maybe power out for, I don't know, 2 or 3, 4 hours at the most. So 2 days. I mean, what is this, like some big power station like blew up or something?
Well,
What happened?
it's crazy. And I'm learning about this stuff, even though I grew up in the country. I grew up in a place not that much different than where I live now, but in Washington state.
So you're outside of Hudson, you say?
Yeah. Like
Okay,
in
that's where my
farm
friend Bobby
country.
Previtt lives.
I live in
Which part?
Stuyvesant.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Do you
I
know where
think
that
he's
is?
really close to you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there are a lot of folks up here. There's a Chatham is great. I mean, and the crazy thing is you can buy a house up here if you've been living in the city forever and you're like, you can buy a house for how much? You can buy a house and your mortgage is less than $2,000. That's insane, right? My
But
it's
but but let's go back to this 2 day power outage thing. So and then when, as a volunteer firefighter, what do you end up doing when that happens?
Well, there's a fire risk because so what happened was a big storm blew through. The thing was over in 10 minutes. I mean, really, it kind of it cruised through, hit hard for 5 minutes. But what happens is these trees fall down,
Yeah, yeah,
large
of course.
branches come out,
Exactly.
they hit poles, and they knock wires off the poles, and then these wires are down.
Right.
They're
That's the danger.
dangerous.
Right.
If they break, they're grounding out, and they're jumping all over the place. I
Right.
mean,
Right.
it's pretty insane. And so then the transformers explode.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah.
so that
Hence 2 days.
happened a lot yesterday.
Wow. That's crazy.
And so as a firefighter, we just basically go set up cones and stand around and make sure people don't get near wires. It's not, I mean,
Right. Okay.
it's not like
But that storm
exciting
hit, I mean, it came through here, but it just rained kind of hard for a minute. It was no big deal.
yeah. Yeah, it's crazy.
We had, when we were in the Skenevis Woods, whatever place, it was at the end of a mile-long dirt road, and we did have neighbors, but the neighbor to the left was never there. The neighbors to the right were old friends of the owners of the home, who are now very good friends of ours. And uh, this is further north than where we are now in Delhi, and it was about 500 feet higher. And as you are probably aware, all these Catskills hills and mountain scenarios, it changed. The weather is completely different, even just a few miles away. So the weather there was pretty intense, actually. And my favorite moment was a rainstorm, and it was snowing there well into May, by the way.
Oh yeah.
But not hard, nothing that stuck, but it was really snowing almost to June, and which I don't mind. It's fine. But at one point, there's
It's still
this
a novelty
rainstorm.
to you as a West Coast guy.
Yeah, I mean, I got so sick of sun and heat, man. I'm telling you, I was so over it well before I ever moved. But I was standing. There was a deck and a door by the kitchen. I was standing with these beautiful trees and rain. I heard this sound, and it was like something cracking open. It was like, and I saw rain coming sideways. It was like it was like CGI animation or something. It looked so unreal, and I just closed the door just in time, except that the window was open. There was a screen on the window, but the window was open, and it just slammed into the side of the house with such ferocity. And it was exhilarating, but I literally couldn't believe it. I'd never experienced anything like this. And it was around situations like that. But yeah, sometimes we lose power.
Being from Seattle, people always say, "Oh, it rains a whole lot there," but it doesn't rain more there than it does here. It just happens over a broader period of time.
Well, it doesn't stop for days and days and days, and it
Yeah.
doesn't rain very hard for days and days and days,
But I'd
right?
never experienced rain like New York rain. It's crazy. I'll tell you what, we definitely are looking to invest in a generator now.
Okay, yeah, that's supposedly very important. Very important to have a generator. Just like if you lived in Malibu Canyon or something, they would say have a massive water tank on your property.
Oh,
So
yeah, huh?
when the firefighters get to your place and they're out of water, they can save your house.
Or if you live in Malibu, you probably have a pool, right? Definitely.
Well, the swimming pool may not be quite enough. So if you
Right.
can siphon the water out of it, then yeah. But this is Malibu Canyon. That's where some of the most gnarly wildfires in my life. Living down there, I wasn't living in Malibu Canyon, but that's where they would happen. The devastating fires would happen closest to Malibu Canyon, and also very close to where I was living when I lived in Eagle Rock and later Glendale. Um, La Cañada, Flint Ridge, and Tahunga, and places like that, which are kind of way sort of northeast from downtown Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Uh, and yeah, I have gnarly stories of wildfire experiences way predating the horrendous stuff that's happened this year. And my good friend Julian Lage, in 2017, he's from Santa Rosa.
I saw you guys. I saw the two of you guys play
Duo?
in Seattle. Yeah,
Was it the duo or the quartet?
it was just the two of you, and
At the Royal Room.
that's right.
Yeah, Wayne's place.
Uh,
Wayne Willis.
yeah, what a cool spot, right?
Love it.
Yeah.
A couple of years later, the quartet with Julian and Jorge Roeder and Tom Rainey and I played right across the street at the that theater, Mental Block. I want to say Capitol Theater because sounds like the same name as the one in Port Chester, New York. But
Oh, yeah. There's the place. It's got a weird entrance, and the theater's in the back.
yeah, it's beautiful. I love that place. But anyway, that's a nice spot right there. The Royal Room is so cool.
Yeah. Did
And
you
I'm
ever?
sorry, I didn't know we were actually already recording a podcast, so I'm just blabbing with you.
Oh no, it's a very casual affair.
Okay, cool. Let's officially start the podcast now.
Great. No, it's not the first time. Sometimes I have the forethought to send an email to say, "Hey, I'll be recording from the top." So,
Okay.
This time I was scrambling to get to work and set up. I didn't have time.
Well, for future reference, Michael, you can reschedule just days later, except that we're going to be in Brooklyn dealing with our apartment.
So, I'm a sober person now, and I figured that was going to help me with my timelines, but the truth is, I'm just terrible with timelines.
I'm pretty bad.
Yeah.
Just so you know.
And so I thought for sure that I saw the Nels Klein Trio play an in-store in Seattle I figured it was 1995 because
you did.
Was it 1995?
Well, it was either 95 or 96, I would think.
I thought so. But,
Yeah.
I had bought the 7-inch. As I mentioned before, I grew up in a tiny little hick town. So
Which town was this?
Granite Falls, Washington. Like a little logging town.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I got to the city, I grew up on FM rock radio. And so I had this real chip on my shoulder about being a hick, And I wanted to be cultured. I wanted to, and so I just immersed myself in what I perceived to be the most challenging stuff I could find. And, I got into Critters Buggin', and I think you probably know some of those guys. And
well, you know that the upcoming record of the Singers, which is now a 6-piece, Skerrick is the saxophone player.
Oh, great. Yeah, I've seen him play 50 times back in the 90s,
Well, we've known each other now for maybe 18 years, but we first played together a year ago. Together. We played on shows together, but never played together. Yeah. But anyway, so as you were saying.
So the guys at the record store, they came to know me because this is pre-internet, right? So, I think Brad Hauser turned me on to Bitches Brew. And I was like, and headhunters, and I was like, whoa, this is incredible. This is jazz that I could sink my teeth into. And then I think your 7-inch showed up, and they said, you should check this out.
Which one?
It's
Because there are ultimately 4.
It's a black and white cover, almost,
as they all are.
and it is like maybe.
Does it have my hand with a weird thing hanging off with a heart, or is it a collage?
It's a collage.
Okay, so is Mike Watt on it on the B side?
On one side, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's the second one. Yeah, that's Beardism, WDTCHC, backed with the right.
Right, and that was also on the full length that came out right around the same time, or the year after.
Different version, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow,
amazing.
So I picked that up and I saw you do an in-store, but when I went back, I was like, I'm gonna go look, because I swear I remember you. You don't remember timelines, but you remember really ridiculous details, right? I had slipped the receipt into the sleeve of the 7-inch. So I was like, I'm going to go back and date check myself. But the receipt read February 1997, which I could not understand. So perhaps...
Well, I don't know, because here's what happened. I did a little West Coast tour with that first trio, Nels Cline Trio. And I think the first one we did with our actual full-time bass player, Bob Mayer, that was the first one. And I don't think that was when we did the in-store. I think the in-store was with an incredible guitar player from Los Angeles. Technically, he's originally from Rosemead, California, named Woody Applenaup. And Woody was subbing for Bob, who couldn't afford to do a tour that made that like no money that week. Right. So Woody came on board and subbed for Bob and played bass, and Michael Preussner on drums. And I'm pretty sure that's what you heard, because we played an in-store at a pretty slick kind of big record store, as I recall. It wasn't some little like funky mom and pop place. It seemed pretty slick. And that was when the Porno for Pyros record that I had recorded on, but didn't know if I made it onto the record, like 1 minute, had come out. And so I remember asking them if they had it behind the counter so I could look to see if I was in the credits, which I was not. And so whatever year that record came out, whatever it's called, maybe that's the key.
That night you guys played at the Weathered Wall, and I went and saw both performances.
Oh, I love that place. I played there also with Scarnella, the duo I used to have with Carla Bozulich.
Yeah.
Cool place.
But I was super, super into it.
How old were you then? You look really young.
I'm 49.
Oh, okay. Well,
I mean, me. You can't see all my silver hair underneath my black hat.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I was, 24.
Okay.
I guess.
I was probably in my 40s, early 40s, maybe late 30s, early 40s.
But so I was so excited when you joined the Fibbers.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And I saw you again at the Showbox on that tour. But
I always love hearing that somebody liked the Fibbers. So, because I was a fan before I ever joined. So it was very exciting. I toured with them as a substitute guitar player for 10 weeks in 1996 when Daniel couldn't tour. So, and then I joined when he left. But yeah, so I hear you, man.
Huge fan. I mean, between that band and like being exposed to your music and stuff that like Brad had turned me on to, I was playing bass then. I got an upright, and I never got good on the upright. I belong, with a 4-string guitar, probably. I could probably handle that.
Well, the upright's quite a challenging instrument and one of my favorites. I almost switched from guitar to acoustic bass at one point in my life.
Really?
Yeah, that's a whole other
That's
story.
another thing that I wanted to ask you about because I think that playing bass was the best thing I ever did for my guitar playing, for my, very modest guitar playing. But, uh, and so I wanted to ask you if you had ever played bass and what you think your experience with that, how it relates to the, the way you approach music in general, or if it
Well,
changes.
I don't play enough bass to be able to really adequately respond to the question because when I play bass, it's usually uh, because somebody else couldn't that second, or because I just have to. So I don't have a concept of really good bass for myself. I haven't accomplished that. So I don't think it's informed my guitar playing particularly. It's just been something I did uh, sort of randomly and without planning. For example, early on in Wilco, I ended up playing bass on a song uh, that's in this SpongeBob movie, and it's called "Just a Kid." And I really think it's because John Stearett, our bass player, didn't know that Jeff was recording that night. It was after we'd been rehearsing with what is now the 16-year version of Wilco, but it was early on. And I think I was just there to play some guitar for Jeff on this song, and I played some 12 string, electric 12 string. And Jeff was playing bass, which he knows how to do. That's what he did with Uncle Tupelo, and he's a very good bass player. But he just he was just sort of not feeling it that night or something, and asked me to give it a shot. So I think that's one of the few kind of widely distributed tracks where I play bass. Because I don't think John remembered or even knew that the session was happening. And they'd already recorded some stuff, so drums were already on there. Glenn had already played drums and whatever. And so I really, my love of bass comes from primarily, I guess one could obviously say, dub and funk on the electric bass side of things. And certainly listening to Rain by the Beatles and hearing Paul McCartney on that was one of the most copied bass approaches. And I love that. Of course, I love that whole style in rock music, but it was the acoustic bass, the contrabass, the upright bass, whatever you want to call it, that is one of my favorite instruments on the planet. And there was a time in my life when I was so conflicted about what to do on the guitar. And this was in probably the early 80s, I guess. I didn't know. I was playing a lot of acoustic guitar. Then I was in a group that was all acoustic. I was playing with Charlie Haynes' Liberation Music Orchestra, West Coast, playing nylon string guitar. And then I didn't know what to do with electric guitar. And I was really becoming obsessed with Sonic Youth and with certain timbres that we maybe now associate with Glenn Branca's universe, and punk rock in the non-generic sense and maybe the earlier sense before it became this cookie cutter kind of aggro thing. And I didn't know whether I should be playing straight ahead jazz. I'd been really, really interested in jazz guitar in the 70s, and I just didn't know what to do, and it was driving me crazy. And I felt like I had to make a decision, which is, I think, part and parcel. One could maybe extrapolate the outgrowth of a dichotomous Western mindset. Like, why choose? Why worry? Why?
Right.
What's the deal? Well, I was just completely tormented. So I thought, well, maybe I should quit playing music because this is driving me crazy. And rather than quit music, my first thought was to switch to bass. And in this case, it would have been acoustic bass. Because of my intense study as a listener, my study of jazz bass, and my love of these great bass players like Henry Grimes and Wilbur Ware and Bar Phillips and Gary Peacock and Scott LaFaro and Charlie Hayden for sure. And I was just really immersed in the avant-garde bass in Europe with these really crazy bass players like the Dutch gentleman Merton van Rechteren Altena, and they're doing all these crazy things with the bass. And I just thought, man, music from two basses, Bar Phillips and Dave Holland. This record, I love Dave Holland's bass playing. Anyway, blah blah blah. I didn't switch to bass. I couldn't afford an acoustic bass.
Me neither.
Yeah. So, and then I saw all my handful of friends who were playing it at the time. One of them was really my greatest musical teacher. It was my musical partner for years, named Eric Von Essen. And watching them cart it around.
Oh yeah.
And then later playing with gentlemen on the West Coast like Ken Filiano or Scott Walton or whomever, and watching and touring with them and watching them deal with it. I was glad I didn't commit. Ultimately, what I did to solve my dilemma, though, was start my own band for the first time in my life, because everything I had done up till that point was, democratic, co-led ensembles, all of which was satisfactory. I do feel it's important to have a leader, one decision maker when push comes to shove is very helpful, in spite of my team sort of hive mentality. And so I just thought, man, I'm just going to start a trio because it'll be the hardest thing for me to do besides solo guitar, which I'm still horrible at. And I did. I just going to play my own music, and I'm just going to do whatever I want and not take any shit, and just see what happens. And that rescued me, to be honest, just internally. It wasn't like a big career move or anything. It was just a continuation of just trying to play and putting on one's own shows and just moving around, doing whatever. And I was working day jobs all this time, so just work the cool record store job or the cool bookstore job, and then try to go play somewhere or cobble together a rehearsal time and I always found great people to play with in Los Angeles. I wasn't looking for that, special moment when I find one person that can understand my language. It was not like that at all. I was really, really fine with, and also had, besides Michael Preussner, the drummer in the trio, before that, it was my twin brother, Alex. We played everything together and pretty much read each other's minds all the time. So I had this amazing drummer to play with my whole growing up.
Did you guys, obviously, I was about to start out like a ridiculous question, you guys discovered jazz together. You guys made this pilgrimage to New York in 76.
Yeah. It happened in 71, might have been 70, but I think it was 71. There were two things that come to mind as far as the epiphany for me, and my brother was just sitting there next to me. It was, and I don't know to this day why we were in our friend's apartment in West Los Angeles, but he wasn't there. his father wasn't there. It was one of these, when I think back on how many unsupervised friends I had living in apartment buildings, which was not super normal for West Los Angeles, but there were apartments, and we had so many friends that basically just raised themselves. Yeah. And one of them was this amazing young man named Bill Watts, who apparently I haven't seen since then, but he still plays and is still in Los Angeles. He moved away to the Midwest for a very long time, but I haven't seen him. And it turns out now everyone who knows him nowadays calls him Billy Watts. When no one called him Billy, so I guess he did the opposite of what most adults do, and he became Billy when he was grown up. But this was a guy who in junior high school could play really, really. His favorite guitarist was Terry Kath from Chicago, the band Chicago Transit Authority. Who accidentally blew himself away with cleaning a gun or something. But he played so much like Eric Clapton and Cream. it was astonishing. And I had no idea. I didn't even know any chords. I played everything with my first two fingers. I was the lead singer in the band, but we hardly ever had vocals, so that was good. We didn't do too many covers. And Bill had his little portable stereo, and my brother and I were sitting in his apartment listening to a record that had been lent to us by our good friend David Hirschman. And he had bought John Coltrane, His Greatest Years, Volume 1, for his father, Jack Hirschman, who's this really, really amazing and insane poet, who was actually at one point later, years later, became the poet laureate one year in San Francisco. But he's been living in Italy now for many, many years. Anyway, he lent that record after giving it to his father for his father's birthday to my brother, because he said, there's some, I heard my dad listening to this record, and there's some stuff on this record that reminds me of some of that instrumental Frank Zappa stuff you like. So you should listen to it maybe. So we sat down in Bill's apartment without anyone else there and put on the first track, which was an edited version of Africa. And I have to tell you, man, that was it. That was it. I had no idea who John Coltrane was. I had never heard music like this. My idea of what we call jazz music was, I guess, some idea of what bebop is, with people popping their fingers and up-tempo crazy saxophone, or my father's big band 1940s era jazz, or listening to Ella Fitzgerald on Verve or something. And as somebody who had warmed to and been inspired by it to a pretty extreme degree, Indian classical music since the age of 10, when I was exposed to Ravi Shankar's music in elementary school.
Wow.
The modal jazz thing, so-called, the sound of Coltrane's horn, the arrangement of Africa, Eric Dolphy arrangement, the whole thing just, it was so riveting and so, it was like a combination of familiar in some ways and absolutely foreign in others. So I became completely obsessed with John Coltrane. And right around the same time, maybe a little later, my brother, listening to Underground FM, KPPC from Pasadena, which is how we heard all the late 60s or 1970 amazing rock and roll that we ended up loving. They played Tony Williams' Lifetime from Turn It Over, To Whom It May Concern Them, in parentheses, and To Whom It May Concern Us, which is really Song of the Wind by Chick Corea, which is bizarre if you hear what he did to Song of the Wind. Later, we discovered where the melody came from, because Chick Corea is credited as the composer, but it's not the same title as Chick Corea's song. Right. But it's John McLaughlin and Larry Young and Tony Williams going completely nuts, fuzz guitar, really intense. My brother had never heard like a high-pitched 18-inch bass drum on a recording before, and he thought it was two drummers. And he became completely obsessed with Tony Williams and with anything Tony Williams played on, which led us to Miles, which led us to basically everything. With Miles, going forwards and backwards, you basically can get everything, So that was it. That's what changed everything.
Leading up to that sort of lightning strike, what was the most the most outside music you were listening to? It was like Zappa and the Mothers. And
well, I mean, that was what my brother was listening to every day. So I wasn't into outside music. I was into, Hendrix was my inspiration to play guitar for my life. Okay. Yeah. I heard Manic Depression. For some reason, they played it on AM radio, Top 30 radio one Saturday. We had not heard the record. We saw the album cover. We thought this might be the coolest record ever, but we had bought records that looked cool without hearing them, and kind of burned, But we were looking at this album cover every time we went to the record store. My brother and I would buy a record every 2 weeks with our allowance. We'd ride our bikes to Do Re Mi Music on Pico Boulevard in West Los Angeles and buy a record either based on a single that we had that we liked. Whether, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
11 Spoonful, Rolling Stones was my brother's favorite band at the time. The Byrds were my favorite band. Uh, but we were really into psychedelia. So Yardbirds, Love, The Seeds. I was really into The Seeds, really into Sky Saxon as a kind of icon for me, more so than Mick Jagger, you know, or somebody like that. Weirdly, I ended up playing a duo gig with Sky like decades later. And that was an amazing.
What a
Uh,
treat.
this, in Silver Lake, in a restaurant called Zen Sushi. But anyway, and he was so cool, man. He was just that was amazing. But to go back to buying records, we looked at Are You Experienced? You know, they sold records in the department stores too. So if my
Right.
family used to like to go to department stores together, and I used to be like enchanted walking into the like all the ladies' perfume area, and then moving on to books, and you'd have remaindered art books for $7. You get Skira, little Skira art books with the tipped-in plates, amazing stuff. Abrams, and then they had records, and they even sometimes had guitars. Just like at the thrifty drugstore, they had Teisco guitars on a
Right.
rack with a display. Um, so we would just look at records while my folks were shopping for bargains. And there it was, you know, Are You Experienced? Look at the cover again and just go, oh my God, look at that jacket. Look at that photograph. Look at what they look like. So when we heard Manic Depression one Saturday afternoon on KHJ FM, AM, 90, 93 KHJ. Yeah, that was their little song, 93 KHJ, Los Angeles. We knew, Alex and I just sitting around a hi-fi, the Garrard hi-fi, like there's a box with speakers going different directions, but there's mono, right? With a
Yeah.
radio in it and a turntable built into it. And we knew as soon as we heard the voice, we knew it was like African American dude, and we knew it was a trio. So we knew within 10, 20 seconds that this was that Jimi Hendrix record. And we started jumping up and down, freaking out. And then when he goes into that step up where he sings along with his guitar and then goes into the guitar solo, that was it. That was it. I was never, ever the same after that. I've never been the same since that moment. And that was when I decided I was messing around with guitar. My dad had bought an electric guitar from a student for me. My parents were both school teachers in the Los Angeles City school system. And so I had this little melody guitar that I still have.
You still have your first guitar?
Yeah. It's a little messed up now because I used it for a window display for the Sonic Youth album Evol, and it got really, really, it was in the sun every day at sundown. It got pretty melted, but I still have it.
Oh,
And I have not been very serious, you know, and of course I didn't even know how to tune the guitar. It wasn't like now where you could just go on YouTube and find out how to play exactly like Eddie Van Halen or something, you know.
Right.
But that was it. I mean, there was no doubt. I was already leaning heavily towards wanting to play forever, but at that moment, that was it. It was like being jolted with very kind electricity. So that was not necessarily out, but Hendrix was so incredibly colorful and flamboyant and theatrical in his early phase. That wasn't something that I was particularly interested in for myself. So my own taste, other than being galvanized by Hendrix and by psychedelia in general, generally moved on to what I would consider folk rock and blues rock, you know. So I became much more the conservative listener than my brother, who was totally into, besides the Mothers and Captain Beefheart and the Magic Band, really liked power trios and stuff because he liked hot drumming. So he was really into like Don Brewer and Grand Funk.
Right.
Or
I love that Red album.
Yeah, well, that was the album, right? But anyway, I was really into. Well, we both liked Cream and Jethro Tull and all these kinds of bands, but the Allman Brothers first record, Allman Brothers Band album, that became, and we loved Santana. Santana was really huge. And Allman Brothers Band, when KPPC played that record, the first album before it had even come out, they played the first two tracks. Don't Want You No More and It's Not My Cross to Bear. That was one of these moments where I felt like somebody had created the ultimate band for me to love, and tried to emulate. So Duane Allman and Dickie Betts, and then also Peter Frampton when he was in Humble Pie.
Oh,
Peter
forget it.
Frampton was a really big influence because all these guys had this kind of melodic style. And when I reflect on it now, I think, okay, they sounded kind of jazzy to my ears, but even though I didn't know what that meant, because they were playing ninths and sixths and whatever, and it was just not pentatonic all the time.
Straight box, right? I
But
think that
beyond that,
Frampton
also,
is
I like blues kind of bands, and there are so many back then. Hippies loved folk and blues, and England was selling rock and roll and blues back to us in a way.
yeah, sure.
And so I was listening to a lot of the British guys first, because they were on the radio. There was so certainly Eric Clapton, but I was really into Jeff Beck, and I still think he's one of the most remarkable guitarists of all time. And listening to Dave Edmunds with Love Sculpture, or listening to Paul Kossoff in Free, or Rory Gallagher with Taste,
Yeah.
And then when he went solo or whatever. And Johnny Winter became important to get back to America. Some of that stuff doesn't hold up so much for me now,
Right.
but it did lead me to B.B. King, Albert King, Freddie King, Magic Sam, Guitar Slim, and then going Muddy Waters, Hubert Sumlin, and then going back into the acoustic world of blues with Mississippi Fred McDowell and Robert Johnson and Lonnie Johnson and that sort of music. So that's kind of more where I was. I wasn't in some sort of outside dude. And I liked a lot of wimpy stuff like Rain on the Roof by the Lovin' Spoonful, or Pretty Ballerina by the Left Bank, these really mellow,
songs,
intimate songs, and kind of pretty wimpy stuff. If I Were a Carpenter by Bobby Darin, I remember having the album only because I liked that song. It just felt so intimate and in kind of naked to me, and that's also what attracted me to Neil Young and Buffalo Springfield. Steve Stills, also, I have to say, really big influence and very underappreciated because why? I guess because what? He's still alive? I don't know. Steve Stills was such an important guitar player, and I loved his voice so much. So I'm babbling now, but these are the formative experiences that led me ultimately randomly to Coltrane. And then right around the same time as Coltrane, we had a friend in high school named Lee Kaplan who hipped us to a bunch of progressive rock, so-called. Right. My brother already had the first King Crimson record, which might be the first really progressive rock album in a way.
Yeah.
But then I got really into Yes and Steve Howe, and I got really interested in Focus. I went to go see them live, and Jan Ackerman ripped my head off. And of course, the Lark's Tongues King Crimson, we saw them every tour they did in the States, and that music became it sort of paired with Mahavishnu Orchestra and Weather Report and Herbie Hancock's bands and Miles. That became pretty much in high school what my brother and I were into, along with my brother got into Art Ensemble of Chicago. Now that's pretty abstract stuff, but we really, really loved this music, and that led us to New Dalta Akri, Leo Smith's band at the time, Oliver Lake, Anthony Braxton,
So I have a multiple tiered question for you. I'm going to try and get them all in. Now,
it's okay because you asked me one question 2 hours
ago. No, that's great. I love that.
Okay.
Someone told me once, a friend of mine said, well, the hardest part, because he grew up playing at the same time as I did, so I didn't get a guitar till 1986. And he said, the only thing harder than learning Stevie Ray Vaughan licks is unlearning them.
Oh,
you go if you go through a phase of diving deep and listening and trying to emulate someone, and then trying to, just get that out, get that away from you. All of these things that you just listed, when I listen to you play, I hear you. I'm sure that you hear hints of some of these things. Maybe, I mean, but I guess I'm curious, when did you consider yourself to be, because you get a guitar and you go to school and you say, yeah, well, I'm a guitarist, right? You're a kid, and then you learn a couple songs and you feel like, all right, I'm doing it, right? I guess, what were those songs that you learned? And I'm assuming they were like Cream songs or something.
Okay, well, anyway.
And then how does that bridge into 10 years, 10 years later, you don't even own an electric guitar and you're playing just acoustic guitar. How did you get these, mostly pentatonic licks out of you? I I feel like I'll hear hints of that stuff when you play, and I'm like, there's these things, there's so much communication happening.
Well, remember that I'm an old guy, but I also want to say, number one, I always had an electric guitar. So,
Oh,
so I
okay.
didn't just, but there was a phase in my life when I think I probably was playing more acoustic guitar than electric guitar because I just didn't know what to do with the electric guitar. But I was still playing in situations that demanded I play electric guitar.
Got it.
So there I was playing because I wanted to play, But but I was never one of these guys who learned a bunch of songs. I have to say that when I was in school and was really young, if a kid could play the riff to Day Tripper, then that kid ruled. You know what I
Right.
mean? It was like you just play the Day Tripper riff. But I don't remember ever learning the Day Tripper riff back then.
I don't
I
think
have
I
to
could
say
still
that
play it.
that when in like my brother and I, Alex and I played with two friends of ours, we formed a band in elementary school, at the end of elementary school, which was been around 1967. Um, Called Homogenized Goo. And Homogenized Goo played three songs at our elementary school graduation, and they were all original songs. And
Is that
I
right?
couldn't play anything that sounded like a normal guitar player on the guitar. And moving forward, when we were in junior high school, and this guy Bill Watts was in the band, and he could play like Eric Clapton, I learned from being next to him and watching his hands and then just sort of asking him questions. So that's when and my father took folk guitar night class, and he's the first person to ever show me an E chord. And that E chord, I just couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, I know this sound. And so, of course, Alex and I got together in the back room at my parents' house, uh, and I just played E, and he played drums, and it sounded like Pink Flag by Wire. You know what I mean? But flash forward, when I heard Wire, Pink Flag, in that one song, I can't think of the name now. I thought, wow, it sounds just like what we were doing when we were 13. But I just thought, I'll just make a song out of an E chord and turn up the amp all the way, which was the amp was like this big. Got it with blue chip stamps. You probably don't even know what that was. You would get stamps at the market and put them in a book. You glue
Right.
them in and collect books.
Mail
And
it
then you
in.
go to the redemption center and you turn in your books and you can pick something out of their catalog. Well, my folks let me get a Melody amp that I blew up doing shenanigans with just feedback and whatever. I didn't know how to play anything normal. So as far as the Stevie Ray Vaughan licks and blues licks and these licks and those licks, Clapton licks, I never mastered them, to be honest. I was trying hardest in high school to get close to something that sounded like normal music. Uh, in junior high school, we had some cover songs, and I would learn them. I don't even know how I learned it, but like Sour Grain by Humble Pie or Your Blues by the Beatles, or we would play a handful of covers, Memory Pain by Johnny Winter from Second Winter. Um, but I didn't know any theory or anything. So it's just this kind of rote memory, like put your hand there and move it there. And Bill Watts would be doing something and I'd watch, or in those days, I had super crazy, nervous, fast vibrato like Jorma Kaukonen from Jefferson Airplane,
Yeah.
John Cipollino with the thing, which now I kind of emulate him with the wiggle, the wiggling bar sound, which I think for me comes from Cipollina and Tom Verlaine from television, which he does with his hand. He has really fast hand vibrato, which I used to have. I don't have it anymore. It became kind of uncool to have fast vibrato after Clapton became God, because he was slow hand. And then of course it went even further with somebody like well, I was going to say not Ron Ashton, because he had a pretty fast vibrato. Mick Ronson with the Spiders from Mars was really wide, slow,
so cool
hand vibrato, and that sort of became the template for cool sounding rock guitar. And it wasn't natural for me, but I taught myself to slow my vibrato down. And now I can't speed it back up. So I use the bar for the wiggle, but I had no licks to unlearn, in a way, is I guess my long-winded way of answering your question. And I know that there are all kinds of people who go into music stores, for example, and God, how many times have I heard people play Stevie Ray Vaughan stuff in a music store? If somebody gets down, they just want to get that exact sound and feel, I guess, and who can blame them, right? But
like I say, everybody at the guitar store has got the blues. They all got it.
But I didn't really have to unlearn that stuff, because I never played in bar bands. I never was popular. By the time my brother and I were entering high school, we were listening to Art Ensemble of Chicago, and none of our friends wanted to know about that. They were starting to follow the Grateful Dead around or whatever.
Right.
And I went to go hear the Dead in '71. And the Allman Brothers with Duane in '71.
Wow.
And when Duane was killed, that destroyed blues rock for me for decades. I couldn't even listen to them anymore. I was so sad. And I was starting to get interested in this long form, grandiose progressive rock, and in John Coltrane and Miles. And so that was kind of, I guess, when I turned my back on blues rock for myself. It was too painful to listen to the Allman Brothers, for sure. But also I was very curious about this new vista of expression, of long form and much more complex music. And that's when I first thought, oh God, I've got to learn guitar.
So did you seek out a teacher?
I did. It was a horrible mistake. Not because teachers are a mistake, but because the teacher I had was incredibly horrible. And I've told the story too many times, but basically, he shouldn't have been trying to teach guitar. He's one of these teachers in a music store that taught 5 instruments or whatever. And he was my brother's drum teacher also. And that was his main instrument. He was an old, a big band drummer, and very heavy on drum rudiments, like, they used to have the National Association of Rudimental Drummers existed back then, NARD. and he had my brother doing all this like intense drum rudiments with a practice pad and really heavy sticks and all this stuff. And my brother was always good. He excelled from day one, playing our friend's drum set, our friend Pat, who was an incredible drummer in elementary school. I don't know what happened to Pat, but he was so generous and would just let us come over and make noise playing along with Rolling Stones records, and but this guy shouldn't have been teaching guitar. And he didn't know how to teach guitar, and he didn't give me any theory, no theoretical basis. So it was all going to be a combination of psychological torment and truly, because it was just a heavy hazing vibe, that old school kind of thing. But also, it was all going to be rote memory with no theoretical grounding. So I didn't know why a C was a C, or what a fifth was, or what the notes on the guitar were, even
because perhaps he did not know.
Yeah, whatever. Anyways, that was a few months before he moved away, sparing me further harm. And I was convinced that I was just never going to understand music, that it was some code. that I couldn't crack. So and I was told it was too late to be a music major because I was just starting my music studies in high school. I took theory in high school. Also realized that that teacher was terrible. When I took the theory classes later, I started over. I was a philosophy major for a year in a fancy college in Los Angeles, and I just thought, what the hell? This is ridiculous. I want to play. So nothing could, to be honest, I'm not trying to sound dramatic. Nothing really, even the feeling that I was never going to understand music, could kill my desire to play, because playing was everything, you know. And as I say, I had this amazing drummer to play with all the time. It was my identical twin brother, Alex. And so that's at least half of a band right there.
That's
You
incredible.
know, so we played it. The only gigs we ever played in high school, we have maybe one or two outside of playing at the lunch hour, once a semester.
Do you have any
And
recordings of the two of you playing back then in high school or even younger?
there are reel-to-reel recordings of us. Yeah, I
Have you?
haven't listened to them. They haven't been destroyed. Back then, I didn't use any effects. I had reverb on the amp. I had no interest in. I mean, people didn't really use them in so much in the '70s in the same way that you heard psychedelic rock and you just crank on the fuzz face. And there's James
Right.
Gurley from Big Brother and the Holding Company playing this kind of almost absurd, awkward fuzz guitar solo on a blues. Um, and I didn't want to do that. I wanted it to be a pure Dwayne Allman kind of guy, you know. Uh, but I had no distortion because I was playing a solid state amp. And when I listened to when I finally heard the Minutemen, and I heard D Boon, he sounded to me so much like myself back then, but without the reverb. You know, I always had reverb on, the ultimate crutch, right?
Right.
Uh, so getting any kind of language that's my own, I still don't think I have one. I think I just react to music and I pull out all this stuff. Now I can play uh, blues and I can play Hendrix type stuff. It's in my head. I can pull it out uh, because it's what's in my ear, and I can do it. But I never tried to do that back then. I didn't even try to get close. I thought it was sacrilege to even try to play like Jimmy. You know.
When was the last, I mean, when was the last time, other than bands that you perform with, that you learned someone else's song that is like a popular music song? Is that, can
Well,
you even
happens all the
recall?
time now.
Yeah?
You know, like for example, I mean, what came to mind when you asked the question, which is now a few years ago, and I'm sure it just happened probably like 4 minutes ago, but that somebody sent me a song or whatever, maybe not a classic, but Wilco did a whole cover set at Solid Sound a few years ago, and so uh, and it was all over the place. So it's incredibly fun. And the guys, you know, in Wilco, they're very good. And somebody like Pat Sansone from the band, he's one of those guys that remembers hundreds of songs.
Right.
So you know, periodically at a sound check, and this is what used to happen with the singers in the early days when Scott Amendola, the drummer, and Devin Hoff, the bass player, then would go into something I didn't know what it was. And they were smiling and laughing and hitting all these figures together. And I'd say, let me guess, is that Rush? And it always was. And
Right.
so, and so Pat, similarly with Glenn, will just start playing Rush songs, you know, and singing every lyric, and Glenn playing every Neil Peart drum fill and whatever. And this was not my world at all.
Right.
But that Wilco set, we played the Kinks, we played the Beatles, we played ABBA, we played Daft Punk, we played. I mean, man, it was all over the place. We played. Uh, geez, what else did we do? It's been a while, but it was incredibly fun to attack that stuff. And you know, we play covers sometimes in an encore. Uh, situation, well, big star quite often. When David Bowie died, we started playing, Space Oddity. And I love these kind of assignments, but they're pretty easy for me now compared to what my sullied, confused teenage brain could get a handle on, you know.
So you were talking about not using any effects when you had the solid state amp in the 70s, and you're going for this like pure thing. I swear that I read at some point, and I use this to fuel. It's funny, like I've read little tidbits with you, and I've used them to motivate myself in different ways at different times in either my professional life or my. I love that you're laughing. Or
Hey, man, I mean,
while I'm recording, also because I've read. It was, I think, I swear it was around the time of the release of Butch. And you said, well, I'll get to that. I swear, did you ever work for Boss?
yes,
You did.
Very briefly. What do you want to know?
Oh, nothing. I mean, it's just that at one point I took a music industry job. I had a couple of music instrument industry jobs, and I was like, well, fuck it. Nels did it. I'm not going to be too proud. I got to make money somehow, and I might as well do something musical.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I didn't work for them other than to bail them out of situations where Skunk Baxter had basically blown them off at the last minute, to be honest.
Right.
So I had a friend from my college, my fancy college day moment, whatever, it was a year, who was in the electronic music program there. And his name, he's still around. His name's Brian Horner. He's had himself, I guess, we lose touch, get back in touch. He's had a very episodic and interesting and all over the place life. He didn't just stay with electronic music, that's for sure. But out of college, he got a job at Roland Corp US as somebody overseeing educational I guess, applications of synthesizers and keyboards, and having to read through manuals coming from Japan, or weighing in on new designs. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, with an emphasis on the where these instruments could be applied in music education. And he was a complete wizard and well beyond I guess, what one would need for a job like that. But this was my first exposure to, almost my only exposure firsthand to a corporate America. What ended up happening was they came out with the GR500 guitar synthesizer, and the first one. And they booked a show at the Troubadour that people paid to go to hear Skunk Baxter and Al Kooper play guitar synthesizer in Skunk Baxter's case, and the new vocoder in Al Kooper's case. Wow. And Skunk didn't make it. And so at the last minute, I basically took, at the behest of my friend Brian, took the guitar synthesizer home for a weekend and messed around with it, and then went and did this Troubadour thing on like Monday or Tuesday afternoon, whenever it was. And in lieu of Skunk Baxter, they had to find another rock personality to, I guess, assuage the potentially irate or disappointed ticket buyers. And they got Greg Lake to show up, and apparently he had used the GR500 guitar synthesizer on the completely ignored late Emerson, Lake and Palmer album Love Beach. So this was probably around 1979 or 80, I don't know. And there was a multi-keyboard guy who worked for Roland, who I played with. and then Al Cooper demonstrated the vocoder, and then Greg Lake sat and smoked cigarettes and answered questions about his career and didn't even play any music, didn't sing. Um, and this led to me then going later when Skunk Baxter didn't go to NAMM for them. He showed up later, by the way, but he wasn't really there full time. And who would want to have been there full time is what I learned. In Atlanta, this was like a summer NAMM. Where it moves around, right? So I did a few days at NAMM demonstrating the Roland Rack.
What was the Roland Rack?
It was like mini rack space stuff. The only thing that has survived from that, and it's very coveted, in fact, in many recording studios, is a stereo chorus that's called Dimension D. But everything else, there was like a guitar synth rack, and it was crap. But I had this amazing setup. This is when they first started putting sovereign booths inside NAMM. So we had our own booth with a roof on it and everything. And I was playing through something like 4 jazz chorus amps and bass cabinets and all this stuff. It was insane, the sound I had going, and playing with Boss pedals, which were some of the only pedals going back then. Because vintage pedals, there was still not much of a vintage market, and vintage pedals were always just broken and sitting in a pawn shop or something. Rarely did you see them functioning in the world. So that's what I did, was just those 2 things, and then I had to sit there with all the salesmen at a big banquet at the Hilton in Atlanta, and the head of Roland US then was this man who couldn't possibly be alive anymore, Tom Beckman, who had been a musical instrument salesman out of his car in the Midwest. He was a real hard ass, and he hated my friend Brian because he said Brian was a hippie, and which he kind of looked like a hippie, but not really. It's just that he looked like he wore sort of like Indian shirts and a necklace and had longish hair. I don't know. Anyway, so it was just constant. Man, he was not a very nice man. But anyway, that was all I did. So I never actually punched a time clock.
Got it.
With Roland US.
And you, before that experience, those couple of experiences, you had never touched a guitar synth?
No.
Or used pedals other than maybe a fuzz or something?
Yeah, exactly. I had an Echoplex that my friend Vinny Golia, the amazing woodwind player composer who became one of my brother and my closest friends and allies for many, many years. He left his old tube Echoplex in my bedroom. And that's really what started me going back to plugging in a pedal. I was improvising in a trio with this man, Brian Horner, who I just described, and my brother. We had a trio called Spiral that was basically, I guess we'd call it space prov. And the spacier the better. He was playing what we now call analog synthesizers. We called them synthesizers. And various flutes from parts of the world through his tape delay. He had a Hohner tape delay that had a nice warble to it. Yeah. And there was Vinny's Echoplex just sitting there. So I plugged it in, and I had a lap steel that I'd been given when I was 13 by my mother's best friend, Jeanette. It belonged to her father and was in storage, and I knew nothing about lap steel. So I just detuned it and just started freaking out on it with tons of tape delay. And that was when I started actually getting interested in effects pedals, I guess, really, for expressive purposes. The first ones I had was a fuzz box called a Nu Fuzz, NU, and then a Nu Wah, even though I don't think they were the same company, both NU.
Right.
Nu Wah, I believe, is Japanese. I'm not sure. And they were just sitting in a drawer. I mean, I hadn't touched those in years because I used them when I didn't know how to play, and I would just plug the fuzz in and turn the melody amp up all the way and just slide my guitar up and down, on the amp, and it had a tremolo arm on it. It was a Pen. It was my second guitar. It was a Pen 3 pickup Japanese guitar that my parents bought me at May Company
Yeah.
department store. I think it was $60 as opposed to the first one, which was
25.
$30.
Yeah.
So I'm stepping up. Um, but by the time I got my good guitar, which was when my father inherited some money from his cousin when she passed away, uh, it was a Gibson ES 335, 1971, brand new, which I still have. That's the guitar
Wow.
on, for example, Either Way by Wilco, and I play this kind of Matheny-esque, George Benson-y kind of solo. That's that guitar. I was not using effects with that guitar. I had just, when I got the Echoplex going, I had just bought a Polytone Mini Brute, which little jazz amp.
Yeah.
And the irony of this was, I really thought I was just going to play straight ahead jazz guitar at this point. I was listening to Pat Martino and Joe Pass and George Benson and Wes Montgomery. And I thought, okay, this is it. I'm going to get one of these little jazz amps, no more messing around. And as soon as I got that thing, we started this space problem and just feel the sound. The thing's turned all the way up. If you ever turn one of those all the way up and play something really loud through a Mini Brute, they're completely sealed. So air just shoots out of the input jack that you're not using. You put your hand over it. It's insane how much air comes out of there.
Don't put your ear next to that thing.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. But anyway, so it was just grotesquely ironic that I had bought this amp with finally I decided what I was going to do, and music didn't go that way.
Yeah, life has a way of showing you what's going to happen, right?
It does, and especially because I guess I just love playing and exploring while I'm playing, and playing with exploratory type people. And improvising is my favorite thing to do of all. Maybe my favorite isn't the right thing to say, but it's certainly the most natural thing for me. It's the only thing that I'm comfortable doing, and I don't get super nervous doing. It's just complete spontaneous improvisation. That's where I thrive. I feel everything
it is
else is
a fucking joy to hear you do it. I'll tell you that.
Well, thanks, but everything else is pretty hard for me. Seriously,
it's always it's always a surprise when you hear someone that you believe everything musical must be relatively easy for them at this point, say, no, that's really hard for me.
Well, I'm being honest.
Yeah.
And I'm also thinking about effects pedals now because I get asked about them way too often. But when you saw me at that in-store, my guess is that my setup was the same setup I had with the Geraldine Fibbers and with Mike Watt, which was mostly Boss pedals. I had, and I still really use a lot of Boss pedals. I had
Stick with what you know, right?
The orange distortion. I had the probably the DD1 then. Now I'm a DD3 guy, and the Boss compressor, and I probably had a CS1, but now I have a CS whatever number it is, 2, 3. It has like the tone knob on it, big improvement.
Right.
But I also had an old vintage Marshall Governor distortion and a volume pedal. And that was probably all I had. I used to be able to fit all my pedals in a toolbox, a little really a toolbox that's maybe 14 inches
right
long, like not very big.
I feel like I remember you having a toolbox. Did you roll a toolbox in?
That probably what had all my pedals in it. And later with the Fibbers, I actually built, and with Watt, I think it was probably not with the Fibbers, but with Watt, I had an actual board in '98 when I did the Contemplating the Engine Room, the last tour of the 4 tours he did. I had played on the record, but Joe Baiza did 3 tours because I was playing with the Fibbers. And then the Fibbers broke up and I went out with him. He asked me to go out for that last tour of that. And I made a board, a literal board with just carpet on it, and put it in a bag.
That's
But
how we
before that,
used to do it.
with the Fibbers, I think what I had, and maybe what you saw, was just a piece of carpet with gaff tape on the bottom, and then I would put that in this weird black sack, the zipper sack, but I don't know what it was for originally, but it was miraculous that I could fit. It was probably for like a like photographic material, like a maybe like a light stand,
Right.
like an aluminum tripod stand, so I could fit my pedals in this black zipper bag. Um, and boy, has that not been the case for a while.
Just make sure it gets to the top of the stack of crap in the trailer or the back of the
Exactly.
van or whatever.
Exactly. Yep.
The other thing that I remember reading from that time um, was you talking about making that Butch album,
Mm.
and I can't recall which song it was, but you were talking about a particular guitar solo, and I don't know why that was happening. I don't know what they had asked. What I do remember is you giving almost like a dramatic scene description, and that was your approach to how you were going to record this guitar solo.
Oh, okay. Well, there are two things I could describe from the session. I think you're talking about Trashman and Furs, and it was Carla Bozulich, the leader of the band, who had co-written the song with our bassist Bill. It's a very sad song, uh, lyrically speaking, and the story behind it was absolutely fresh then, and about one of Carla's favorite people's death, dying of complications from AIDS. And she asked me to play, and the Fibbers hardly had any guitar solos in their music,
Right.
Which certainly didn't bother me. I'm not really interested in finger wiggling as much as I'm interested in music. So she asked me to play a guitar solo that was as close as I could get to the sound of a very earnest 14-year-old boy sitting on his bed trying to play hot shit lead guitar. And that's what the solo on Trashman and Furs is. It's my attempt to sound barely competent but earnest. That was cool. The only other like crazy thing I did on the Butch session, conceptually, and I don't mean crazy, but I just mean a little bit extreme, I guess, was I played Hammond organ on the song Butch on the bridge when Carla sings, "Took his time in the mirror this morning, shades of light green, deep blue, and just a touch of rouge." And because it's about a aging transvestite. And so I dressed up like kind of like Al Cooper. And I used to always wear nail polish then. So I had my nail polish on, and I put on like aviators. And I think I had like some kind of cape or some kind of weird thing. And I went into this weird, it was like being an actor or something. I took on a role because I'm no organ player, but I needed to riff. Right. And I wanted it to sound like Al Cooper on those Bob Dylan records, but I'm no organ player. So I just did my best, but the only way I felt like I could get into it was to dress up as some other person. And one of the greatest things about the Geraldine Fibbers, besides the music, was how incredibly open and generous they were about doing anything, no matter how flamboyant or how off-putting some normal person might find it. They were very encouraging of any impulse I had to do something colorful or interesting or potentially odd. And so it was a really good nurturing environment for that kind of creativity. And the rest of it, I think, might have been just playing guitar. So that what you're asking about might have been Trashman and Furs is what I'm thinking.
I think so, but that little, just that spark sort of informed me to get inspiration when whenever I was struggling. And I'm talking about I've been in very straight rock bands. That's pretty much what I've done for everything I've done. But there still have been the moments where I'm like just uninspired, and I'll set a scene in my head and try to imagine a thing, and it came from that.
Oh, that's cool.
It
I
was
mean, I have
great.
to say that there are like playing with Mike Watt, for example. He speaks more often, unless you're doing a cover song, and then he's super literal, and you better study that song and know every aspect of it. And I'm talking about the Stooges, who were not. They were making stuff up as we listened to it. But now I played in one of his many Stooges cover bands back in I guess 20 years ago now. And man, I had to play some of that Ron Ashton stuff note for note, because he does all Iggy stuff word for word. I mean, he can be very literal. We did the same thing with Beefheart. But when it comes to his own music, he quite often speaks in metaphors. And so, Contemplating the Engine is a highly conceptual work, and I believe it's absolutely brilliantly conceived. And it was a very fun recording session. And he's asking me, propellers, like, what bicycle spokes. He's saying when we have a time of day for each song and the color of sunset, and we have a color, we have a time of day, we have images, and we have to read this. We had to read the sand pebbles. We get all kinds of direction, but very rarely is it, oh yeah, play this in the Lydian mode or whatever, because I really love that poignant feeling of the Lydian mode or something. No, it's not that at all. And that is incredibly fun. And it's a challenge. It's a good kind of challenge.
It seems like a much more creative way to approach communicating ideas to musicians.
A lot of musicians would probably really, really not respect it. But when you're dealing with a certain kind of player with a certain kind of mindset, it's fantastic.
Let me jump forward.
Sure.
How did you come to start playing with Julian? And if you've told the story a million times, I apologize.
No,
I don't.
it's really a marvelous story, and I've told it a handful of times, but it takes a little bit of, obviously I'm not succinct, so it takes a little bit of backstory
Great.
to get there, but to try to be as concise as possible. I had written a piece. I had been asked to write a piece for Jazz Times of 10 tracks by any jazz artist I choose, and to describe each track what I like about it. So I chose 10 tracks by Jim Hall. And I played in a band in the mid 80s, led by a man named Julius Hemphill, who's an amazing woodwind player, composer. He's no longer alive. He died in the 90s. But one of the tours in 1985, there were two guitars. There was a guitar added to the band, and it was Bill Frisell. And Bill I had met in 83 when I had gone to New York to audition to play with Paul Motion's band. And as a second guitar player, he was obviously the main guitar player and played with Paul for decades and beautifully. But the reason I mention this is because there was a woman making a film about Bill. One of the people she interviewed was this man named Brian Camilio, who was doing Artist Share Records, and who turns out at the time was kind of managing Jim Hall as well and releasing records of Jim's. And I was next in line to be interviewed by this woman, Emma from Australia, who made this now, it's been out for a couple of years now, Bill Frisell documentary. And so he sent along with her a copy of what was at the time a very new record of Jim and Bill together, double record of duets and quartet. And said, Jim read your piece in Jazz Times and really, really liked it. And I'd like to invite you to these lunches that we have to try to get Jim out of his apartment sometimes, which he called we I learned were called the crony lunches. And Jim, at this point, I was living on West 11th Street in the West Village, and Jim was a block away on 12th, West 12th, which I'd only learned from a guy who interviewed me for NPR. He said, Jim Hall lives right a block away. I was like, what? Didn't run into him on the street ever. And people constantly said they saw him walking Django, their dog, he and Jane, his wife's dog. But anyway, finally I was able to go to one of these crony lunches, and I was very shy. I didn't want to go. I told Brian, I said, Brian, I'm not a jazz guy. I'm embarrassed to even try to sit with these people. I don't know them all. And he said, look, you have to go. Jim's interested in you. So it was a half a block from where I was living. So the end of the street. That restaurant's gone now. It was called French Roast at the corner of West 11th and 6th Avenue. And so I finally was able to go. I wasn't on tour, and there's Jim, and all his friends, like as many as could make it. This guitarist Kate Shute or Adam Rogers, and bassists Scott Colley and Steve Laspina and John Pondell. I mean, just a lot of people I didn't know. I'd met Adam certainly, but and Scott Colley I sort of knew. Now I know him. But and there's Jim quite frequently talking about this guy Julian this, Julian that. I learned that he was this young guitarist that was playing with Gary Burton's new quartet at the time with Scott Colley on bass. So I went back to where I was living, and I just looked him up on YouTube. I was like, who is this Julian Lage? And it was like, what the, and then finally Julian was able to make it to one of these crony lunches, and he's from California. I'm from California. Scott Colley's from Los Angeles. It just became a really cool hang. And I said, hey, Julian, I've got this new guitar that I had sent from Chicago, from the Wilco Loft. It's this little Oahu acoustic, if you want to check it out. And so he came over to the house, sat down in the kitchen, played a few chords. It's one of those things where you can just hear him play one little arpeggio. You just kind of know right away. You're like stabbed in the solar plexus with this presence of musicality and mastery, And I was in a big crisis, internal crisis at this point. This is when we were constantly touring Wilco, constantly touring on this record, The Whole Love. And I was burnt, man. I was burnt on myself more than anything. I was burnt on my sound. I was burnt on thinking about music. Everything was, I had no idea what to do with my band, The Singers. I needed to add musicians. I didn't know if I could, because I needed to have a foil, or I just needed to stop playing lead guitar. I didn't know what to do. But I had this idea that one of the things that would be good to do would be to start a so-called chamber jazz trio, maybe with acoustic guitar, cello, and a woodwind instrument or something really quiet and something completely acoustic, or play a jazz guitar, no effects. So Julian and I decided to get together and improvise together. And in the little TV room there on West 11th Street. And it was just one of those events in life that it was so instant how much communication there was going on and how compositional our improvisation sounded, that and I'd been asked to do a benefit concert for the Downtown Music Gallery, and I thought, well, maybe I'll try this trio idea with two guitars and a cello, and I had a cellist in mind who I won't name because he was unable to make the gig because he went on tour at the last minute, and I had done so many guitar duo things that I was resisting the idea of making this a guitar duo. I played duo with Thurston Moore and with Elliott Sharp and G. Stinson and Jeremy Drake, and I'd played a little with Mary Halverson, Ava Mendoza, like all these. I mean, I love playing with other guitar players, I guess, and many guitarists I think are this way. But I asked Julian, I said, so Julian, cellist can't make it to this gig, but I've got this benefit gig at Le Poisson Rouge. Do you want to, should we do it as a duo? I've done so many duos. He said, yeah, we should do it. And that was it. We never looked back. You know, I really miss our duo. And we keep saying we're going to do it some more, but he's in Nashville now. He left Brooklyn this year. He and his fiance, and you know, I did this quartet with him just to sort of see what it would be like, knowing that it had a shelf life of only a year or two. And we did it, the Nels Cline Four. But the duo is what I think we both love so much and miss. And really, it's improvising in that duo. We do some writing, and we made the record. And I was just coming back from almost career-ending nerve pinch then, so my left hand wasn't really moving so well, but I still treasure that recording. And then we toured on and off for 2 years after that as a duo.
I I got to the venue and I hadn't pre-purchased tickets.
Oh yeah, we did 2 shows right at the Royal Room,
Yeah, I
and
hadn't I
yeah, they were
hadn't
pretty packed.
pre-purchased, and it was sold out. And I just stood outside, and I was so bummed. Uh, my wife works for Yoko. Oh no,
Really?
yeah, you've met her actually. I think my wife was at your wedding.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow, at Le Poisson Rouge, that American wedding.
Um,
Wow, wait a sec.
yeah.
Okay, wow, okay.
And so I called her, and because I hadn't moved to New York yet, I was still living in Seattle, and I think we were already married, and I was like, oh, I'm so bummed. Do you I basically was like in a panic. I had to see the show, and someone had bought a whole table inside, and they saw me, they knew me, and they came out and they said, hey, come sit at our table. So I lucked into the show. I just was
Okay, I'm interrupting you now. I'm sorry.
no, do
Did you
it.
talk, did you talk to me at the show?
No, the funny thing is,
Okay, this is sounds so familiar.
I've been in a room with you a half a dozen times, including that record store. I mean, and I think at the showbox you wandered around after the show and talked to people, but I was always so in awe uh, of watching you perform. I was too nervous to talk to you.
Oh, well, silly boy. But I seem to recall somebody with a very similar story at that Royal Room show who, you know, it had sold out, and then he got to a table with friends or something. I got privy to some very a story that's coming through my foggy brain,
I
because I
even
remember that
lingered
show very
around.
well. I remember the scenario. I remember sitting there, and of course, I have a really deep love and respect for Wayne Horowitz and his music, and this was my first time being in his plays, and so I remember it really well, hanging out with him backstage and talking about stuff, and you know. So I thought maybe we talked for 2 seconds or something, because somebody else had the same kind of like, I didn't think I was going to get in and I made it and blah 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 experience, you know.
Yeah. I mean, now I see. I wish that I would have talked to you at the record store. I mean,
Well, what are you going to do?
sure, of course. Um,
But you like the duo show, I guess.
oh, it was incredible.
I
I
mean,
mean, I left just with my mouth open, just mouth breathing. You know, just like
I
ah.
went through from that experience of playing with Julian. I really always wanted to play with Julian because I always played better with Julian.
Someone told me when I was first starting to learn how to play the guitar, and this was like empty advice because everyone was better than me. They said always play with people who are better than you, and pay
It's good
attention,
advice.
and don't let them know how don't really let them know how bad you are. Like make them think that you're a lot better than you are. And I'll tell you, to this day, I still live by that rule.
Well, I can tell you, and I'm not, this is not false modesty. I can say 2 things on that. One, yes, when I started out playing, uh, I always played with people who were better than me, especially after high school. You know, my brother was always better than me, but then there were some of the other ne'er-do-wells, and we found the weirdos who wanted to play instrumental music who, you know, do you love King Crimson and Weather Report? Then you're the guy for us, you know. So, um, uh, but after that, I just played constantly. Was playing with people who I could barely keep up with, and the second part of this is, I say no false modesty. It's still how I feel about almost everything I'm doing. Is that I'm constantly playing with people who are way on a higher level, and I'm just trying to keep up with whether it's you know, Ben Goldberg, or whether it's you know, my friends in Norway and Huntsville, or whether it's Ron Miles or Julian or Scott Colley or Jorge Roeder or Tom Rainey or whomever. These people are, they're masters of way more than I've ever been able to accomplish, you know, and this pure musicianship is what I'm talking about. Whether you like what they play or you think their music is fancy and advanced isn't the point. What I'm saying is that these people have a skill set that's generally well beyond mine. And I just try to keep up, but I do have on my side uh, listening. You know, I really do listen when we're playing, and I have had a little ear training, and I pay a lot of attention. So I still never got my reading together though, and that stems back to uh, the high school guitar teacher guy
Right.
who kind of destroyed me. And it's a sad excuse, really, in a way, because if I was intrepid and brave or a contrarian, a rebellious guy, I would say, "Let's screw that guy. I'm going to do this," you know. But instead, I would go into a complete meltdown anytime there was music put in front of me, and I have a panic attack pretty much. So, um, so I basically avoided it, except to try to write music. I've learned how to write music and notation, and I can kind of get through. But I don't get up every day and play through flute exercises or play through Bach, you know, or anything like that, or pull out the thesaurus of scales and melodic patterns and go like, oh yeah, you know. I just sit down and play guitar. Theory was what saved my ass, you know. I mean, and ear training. That's when I started to understand music, how music is put together. But that wasn't until I was out of high school.
I like that you use the word fancy to describe things that go over probably like the average music listener's head, and and to describe your college experience, because I use the word fancy all the time in, I think, similar ways, and I think it is a very underused descriptor.
Oh, good. I think I got it from Carla,
Is that
actually.
right?
I think that's one of her adjectives for various things. Sometimes things she really, really likes,
Right.
like a really good style, or somebody's got some cool style, and she goes like, "Oh yeah, she's
Fancy.
fancy," you know. Um, but I also have to say that I like, in spite of the millions of notes that are buzzing in my head that are probably come from Indian classical music love and Coltrane and John McLaughlin, uh, uh, I really don't strive for complexity's sake in music, because I don't find it as pleasant to listen to. So I really like sonorous things. I like things that have a sound, a resonance, and some of that is going to be very slow moving. And I was out on the road with doing a few singers gigs, and and you know, Trevor Dunn's been playing bass the last several years, and Trevor had picked up a copy of a Morton Feldman string quartet somewhere while we were traveling, and opened it up, and he looked at it, and I remember him saying something to the effect of, "Wow, there's really not much here," you know, because it's very open, slow, and repetitive. And sometimes that's all you need, is what I'm saying. it's like it would be like walking up. If you want to hear more, you can always go find somebody who's doing a million things at a million miles an hour. But if you want more from everybody, I think you're crazy, because
Right.
like it'd be like walking up to Alan Sparhawk in Low and saying, "Can you guys pep it up a little?" You know what I mean? Well, I think there's something you're not getting here,
Right.
which is some of the most beautiful music ever made, in my opinion. So I strive more for a certain effect of resonance and dynamics than, I guess, virtuosity.
Well, will you use a tool to accomplish that, or will you say, okay, these are the tools I have? Do you show up when you're recording? Will you show up with 6 guitars and 4 amps, or will you show up with a guitar, an amp, and say, I'm going to do everything I need to do with these tools?
I've done both. Living in New York City, there's no way you're going to be able to use 4 amps and 6 guitars.
I learned that the
It's
hard way.
completely absurd how many guitars I own, and I have quite a few amps also. Not so many in New York, but like in the Wilco loft. Uh, and I joined Wilco, and I'm surrounded by. Well, I'm particularly influenced by Mr. Tweedy's guitar obsession. So he was I guess, inadvertent enabler, I guess you could call Jeff. And here it was the first time. I wasn't broke for the first time in my life. I never had kids. I had cheap rent in California. And even when I was living in New York, I wasn't paying rent for a long time, and I was just paying rent in California, and left all my stuff there and let people live in my place for free. And um, as such, I'd be out on tour, and I have a deep love of wacky guitars, and I would end up buying guitars, and not expensive guitars, but I accumulated a bunch of guitars over the last 16 years I've been in Wilco, and it's pretty ridiculous, and I'm actually really embarrassed by it. But a lot of it did come from this methodology that you described as like example A, which is coming into the studio with a whole bunch of stuff. And I know people who do this. And I guess I thought this is a good way to go. Uh, and I realized that ultimately, especially with the amps, it's completely useless to me to have a bunch of amps. So I go in with no more than 3 amps. One of them is going to be super, super tiny and weighs nothing. It's this little Magnatone.
Which one
eight
is
inch.
it?
It's a Magnatone 8-inch speaker, but still has the cool tremolo vibrato. So it weighs nothing. I bought it at Willie's American Guitars in St. Paul.
I'm
And
dying to find a troubadour, a Magnatone troubadour. I played a gig
I
on one of
love
those. I
I
loved
love
it.
Magnatone amps, and that's been my main. Was for years with Wilco as my main recording amp was a little 112. I don't never know the models, but and then I have one combo amp with headroom and tone that has a 12-inch speaker. That's really all I need. And then I've made records with not. I'm not even using my own amp because I'm showing up somewhere in a car with not knowing what I'm doing, and they say we have plenty of amps, so I just go out, plug into something. That's what's like I'm all over quite a few songs on Joan Osborne's new record, and I just went there. If I hadn't had my pedal board equipment stuff, all my thinking I was going to have to do looping and whatnot, I could have walked there because she's just blocks from where we were living in Brooklyn. Um, but I just used whatever. I knew they were going to have some cool Fender Princeton or something. So I just used whatever they had, and so I've tried it all. Like when I did this record called Coward, it's just me. I recorded it in my friend's home studio in Los Angeles called Catasonic, and Mark Wheaton engineered it. Brilliant, beautiful guy, and I went in there after thinking about doing an overdub record for years and years, and I'm finally going to do it. And just because I'm not broke, I'm going to pay for it. I'm going to go in his studio for 5 days and just see what I get out of the experience. And I went in there with, I would say, at least 12 guitars, acoustic, electric, 12-string, detuned, open tuned, my Quintronics drum buddy, a bunch of Shruti boxes, uh, and I just said, okay, I'm not going to use any flutes like resistance flutes, which I like to play sometimes, and I'm not going to use any keyboard sounds, and I'm not going to play any percussion, except I used drum machine sounds off my K oscillator on one thing. And yeah, man, I went in with a lot of gear. You know, I went in there with all that stuff, but I used a lot of it. But that was the point of that session.
Right.
So why I have all these guitars in New York is it's actually wrongheaded. It's embarrassing because if I can go to a session with 4 guitars in New York plus whatever else I have, I can't even walk from the car in across the sidewalk into the building. You know what I mean? I need help, and I'm not into getting help. I need to be able to walk. Well, just like touring without Wilco, but doing my own stuff or playing out on the road with Scotty Mandola's band or with whomever, with Ben Goldberg or with, you know, even with Yuka, with my wife Yuka and our duo Cup. I have to be able to walk through the airport. You know what I mean? Right. So I did buy a double gig bag for one singer's tour of Europe because I forced myself to bring a 12 string because I love electric 12 strings so much. So I got a double gig bag with my Fano 12 string and my Jazzmaster in there, and boy, that kicked my butt, but it was worth it. And that's the only time I've ever toured with 2 guitars.
Really?
Yeah, other than with Wilco, of course, where I got 15.
That blows my mind.
You can't do it. I can't afford it. You know, I don't have my own amp ever because you just use backline or borrow stuff from some friend in the town. And I have my effects pedals and you know, a Pelican case.
Right.
And, you know, I have the stacked little thing and it fits into a Pelican case, guitar suitcase, and a shoulder bag. That's all you can muster. I still wish I didn't use so many effects pedals, so I could be like my friends, like Julian or Steve Cardenas, or guitarists that have like 4 pedals,
right?
And they could just carry them on the plane in a little
4 micro pedals, the little tiny ones.
I do that with the quartet with Julian, or with this quartet I'm doing. Well, I haven't been able to play live with them, other than when we did an improvising thing last year at the Stone in Brooklyn. But it's called Concentric Quartet with me and Tom Rainey, bassist Chris Lightcap, saxophonist Ingrid Laubrock. And with the Nels Cline 4, I just had this 5 pedal board. And that's because I was not using anything but my compressor, delay, reverb, volume pedal, and an overdrive pedal. So that's it.
In regard to all the guitars, though, don't you think that even though you think that it's excessive,
it's horrible?
Aren't there moments when you walk over to one that's just been sitting there and you pick it up and you're like, oh, and you are inspired to do something that, 5 minutes earlier, even if you had another guitar in your hand, you weren't inspired to do?
Yes.
And so don't you think that makes it worth it?
Well, I will be absolutely brutally honest, and this sounds also hyperbolic, but it's not. Other than a handful of guitars that I've been given and I'm too embarrassed to get rid of because they were given to me by dear friends or somebody who really wanted me to love the guitar, and they're guitar builders. And
right.
You know, it doesn't happen that often, but these are quite often the guitars I don't really have so much feeling for, but all the rest of them, I love them. I literally, almost every time we're on tour with Wilco, and I sure hope we can do it someday again, go to sound check, and I walk out and I look at my vault of guitars every day and think, God, I love these guitars. I love every single one of them. They're all selected with care, and they make me so happy. And I don't need to be using 15 guitars. There are 13 in the rack and 2 lap steels, 1 in G, 1 in standard tuning. I do need electric 12 string. I do need a double neck for one song. Now, if
Great.
that song's in the set list and I don't have it, I'm screwed. So it's there. And then I need like hum canceling guitar, and I need my jazz master and a backup jazz master, and everything else. Yeah, it's kind of a luxury. You know, I can pull out this guitar that sounds not that different from my jazz master, not that different from the Les Paul Jeff gave me, but they feel and look different and they're fun to play. And, you know, like Dennis Fano gave me a Novo Miras guitar. And that's what I have here, where we're staying upstate, hollow body, but it's just such a kick-ass guitar. It's got mastery tremolo and bridge on it, and it's beautiful to look at. And so I went to take it out and play it on stage with Wilco. You know, I didn't need to, but I wanted to.
Right.
So it's a grotesque luxury, but I do love those guitars. You know, and I wish I could go out with my own music and at least have a backup guitar for when I break a string or something. But I don't have that.
You can change a string and tell some jokes.
Until my vision started going, I was pretty fast. You know, I definitely, nobody's faster than Mike Watt, though. I remember, of course, he rarely breaks bass strings, but he does play incredibly hard. And he broke a string. We were on this was 95. We were on the it was called the Crew of the Flying Saucer, playing the stuff from Ball Hogger Tugboat.
Right.
And we were on one of these things they used to call radio festivals. And in the summer, they would happen. And basically, it was kind of like legal payola.
Yeah.
You know, you play the festival for virtually no money with a bunch of bands, and then they promise to play your record. And there
they
we were.
Almost never do.
Yeah, we were in San Diego State, and somehow we had done a bunch of these that summer, and somehow we were on second to last of all these bands, and we were on right before Duran Duran, and Duran Duran were touring on their covers album. But the other bands had been on a bunch of these with us, like on Bush. They were just starting out pretty much. Better Than Ezra on all of them.
Right.
This one had Sublime and Matthew Sweet. And there we are right before Duran Duran, and Mike Watt breaks a bass string. And of course we have no, tech guys. There's no guitar tech. There's no bass tech. He was very luxurious back then and had his own front of house guy. He hasn't done that since 98, I don't think. But so he started talking to the audience, and he changed that bass string in between songs, and I would say it was under 2 minutes. He just started talking
about him like breaking
and then what? He taps it, hits the bass to cap the song off. We're in. It was absolutely remarkable.
That's pretty mind-boggling.
I loved it, and also it was just so weird to be playing that late. We were always on usually we were on really early in those shows. I don't know how we ended up on before the headliner, but
most festivals I've ever played, the sun was still out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and I got to smoke weed with some of the guys from Sublime after we played. That was really fun.
I bet those guys could smoke some weed.
Southern California, man.
What about the new record?
My new record.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, it's coming out November 13th on Blue Note. It's an expanded version of The Singers. I don't think I'm going to be able to go back to the trio ever. I added. I was fortunate enough to get Cyril Baptista to play percussion with us for a while. So I was thinking, okay, now I have a quartet. This is feeling better. But I got this idea. I did an expanded version of the band at the Victoriaville Festival up in Canada a few years ago, because Michel Levasseur, who is the festival, really specifically asked me to do a larger version of The Singers with a woman musician in the band. And I said, well, that's fine. And I just experimented with it. And it had to be a sound check rehearsal thing. I mean, we had no rehearsal, which is normal kind of for me. And I like rehearsing. I wish I could do it more, especially with The Singers. But now I'm like half the band is Skerrick in Seattle, Scott Amendola in Berkeley, and the rest of us are in the sort of New Jersey, New York area. But but at Victoriaville, I had I wanted Yuka to play, but she couldn't do it. I think she was in Japan or something then. And my good friend and one of my favorite musicians on the planet, Zena Parkins, was available. Zena played electric harp. Brian Marcella on keyboards, who I'd heard with Ciro's band Banquet of the Spirits, and I'd heard him play solo at the Kitchen in New York. And Mark Rebo on guitar. And so that was, and Ciro and Trevor and Scott. And so that was a pretty badass group, but we didn't quite get the quite enough time for it to be, I guess, a perfectly finished sounding ensemble effort. Moving forward, I just thought, man, I can't, the quartet with Julian can't keep going because Julian's too busy. And we didn't really intend to make that last forever anyway. I wanted to do this new singer stuff, and I had just played with Skerrick for the first time after knowing him for 18 years at a jam, one of these post-Fish concert jams that they do. And I guess people who go hear Fish can hear 3 hours of Fish and then want to go hear more music. I don't know how this is possible, but we get paid really well to jam with friends generally at the Sony Music Hall. I've done it. I did it twice at midnight. Basically, you start play till 2 a.m, and one of them was with Skerrick and Billy Martin and Mono Neon and me. And so I finally played with Skerrick, and he was playing tenor saxophone and keyboards, which was surprising. And man, I just couldn't believe it. It took that long to actually play with Skerrick and get some really cool stuff going. And I never thought I'd put saxophone in the singers, but there I am thinking, wow, sure was fun playing with Skerrick. And Scott Amendola, who's known Skerrick maybe even longer than I have, said, he loves the singers. He loves your music, man. And I said, really? And he said, man, he's been following your music for years. And I thought, okay, I guess I'm going to have saxophone in this next recording. And then Brian, who I just think is one of the unsung heroes of keyboards and just an incredible person. So I just recorded, what I thought might be demos for a couple of days in Brooklyn. Flew Scott and Skerrick out. Skerrick, not surprisingly, was coming up from New Orleans, where he spends a lot of time. Scott Amendola too, actually. And we messed around. I barely had any material. I just had these sketches and these ideas, two or three songs that were really thoroughly composed. And we did a lot of improvising because I was going to take these improvs and edit the crap out of them and make them into tiny tidbits and collage them and try to make some kind of crazy record like that would be something like a 70s, like some sort of Os Mutantes psychotic Brazilian kind of psychedelic experience.
Right.
And then the improv started. I listened to them afterwards and thought, whoa, they're really good. And this is a band that never even played a gig together, specifically this lineup. And now I have a double album coming out. It's called Share the Wealth. And, I played it for Don Was, or like I didn't play it for him. I got it to him and he listened to it. And he basically, I'm not signed for a number of records to Blue Note. Basically, it's kind of one at a time situation. And this is the third Blue Note record. And just like the first two, I guess Don listened to it and went like, let's do this. And now I have this really wacky jazz rock psychedelia. I don't even know how to describe the record. It's typically all over the place, I guess. And like all my records, except for the Nels Cline 4, are too long. Double vinyl, just fits on a compact disc. So it's 79 minutes.
Perfect.
And so we released Blue Note people asked for these songs to be leaked, and call them singles and make videos for them. So the first one just came out last Friday. and it's called Beam Spiral. And my wife Yuka did a video for it. It's almost 9 minutes long. It's very psychedelic, and seems to be, people kind of digging it, I guess. I don't know. The second single comes out October 30th, another video, and that's a completely different vibe. And it's us covering a very simple but beautiful song by Caetano Veloso, called Segunda. And the video is made by a team of Brazilian filmmakers.
Is it the first song on the record?
It is. On
That's
the new
ironic,
record.
isn't it?
Yeah. Well, what are you going to do? Anyway, and then the record will come out after the election. So who the hell is going to be buying or listening to records after that? I don't know.
Well, I don't know. We'll see what happens after the
We'll
election.
see what
It's
happens.
a pretty
It's
wacky
all
time.
very surreal at this point.
Right.
It's non-stop surreality.
Well, you are living in America right now. You are no longer living in New York, right? So you get in your car and you drive around and you're seeing a lot of different things.
I am. Well, thank God we have a car. We have a car loaned to us by our good friend who got us up here out of our building with its hundreds of residents. But I travel around a lot, and I've driven around the country many times.
Right.
Certainly in Wilco, it's a tour bus scenario, so you just wake up in a new place. But before that, it was always cars and vans. And Julian and I just rent a car. It was a duo. We just drove all over the place, all over the country, playing duo.
And you guys just had a couple of arch tops, right?
Yep.
What a way to tour.
And our ZT Lunchbox amps,
yeah,
which I can even fly with because I have one that has, well, it's actually, hold on a sec, because it's all I have here. I don't ever plug in to practice anyway, but it's just in case I need an amp, because we bailed out of Brooklyn so fast. But they don't make these anymore, these bags. So I would just get on the plane if we were flying, like we were all over Canada one year. I would just get on the plane with my amp.
Like that and a guitar. Would you check your guitar?
Yeah, it's in a flight case. It's my Barney Kessel. It's in a flight case. And it'd be perfectly in tune coming. It's one of those big Carlton cases. And the thing would be perfectly in tune still, just coming straight out of the case. It's a completely temperature, it's sealed. And Julian then was playing his Manzer. He had a flight case for his. And we didn't even use tuners.
Have you lost any guitars from flying?
Huh?
Have you lost any guitars flying, like having them broken or never?
No. I did have an experience on a singer's tour of Europe where the guitars didn't show up for a couple of days.
Right.
But they eventually found me in I believe it was in northern Italy.
It's always Italy, man.
But I did only had to do one show without my two guitars, and that fortunately was in Wels, Austria, and my man Wolfgang there. I arrived after telling him like, "Hey, I don't have a guitar. I didn't have any guitars," and I got there, and there were 6 different guitars on the stage from his friends and his guitar builder friend, and no 12-string, but so it was no big deal. I think actually might have done one other show on that tour, and it was and I played the whole show on like a Squier Strat or something.
Is that right?
Yeah, of course. And when you get a Squier, because the other thing I had on my rider is one guitar, electric guitar in working condition. And that's just for open tuning, so I could play something like Thurston County, that song called Thurston County, and I don't even remember what that tuning is now. But and I would just play one song. It's open tuned and capoed, that song.
In working.
So I think I ended up playing like you always get these like a Strat or a Tele almost every time, like a Japanese or Mexican or whatever, and then with 10s. And that's the hardest part for me. It's like I can play pretty much any amp. If it's not too trebly, I'll be happy. I'll be miserable if it's too trebly, but I'll still to use the tone knob, which I hardly ever use. And then, but having tens on a guitar is rough for me. I don't like light gauge strings too much.
You go for the heavies.
I play 12s,
Yeah.
except if I'm playing stylistically something different, like with Wilco or on the new Joan Osborne record. Almost every song that I'm on, I'm playing my little Silvertone with 11s on it, and it's like a very short scale guitar.
Right.
And I'm having to bend notes a lot, which I don't do that much in my own music, or even with Wilco, where I'm playing my Jazzmaster, which is extra string length and 12s. It's pretty hefty. But if I'm playing my Jerry Jones or Silvertone or Dano type guitars, or the little Les Paul that Jeff gave me years ago, this gold top chambered Les Paul, it's really fun. But I can't go wimpier than 11.
I would love to see a picture of you playing a Squire Strat. That would be that would make my
Hey,
day.
do you know the guitarist Marc Ducret, French, amazing shredder, improviser, composer? The guy's a super genius. He's not very well known in the States.
I will tomorrow.
He spent years and years having that. His only touring guitar was a Squire Strat. And now I think he has a Traveler guitar, like even smaller.
Right.
It just goes in a bag and it's like nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
Because
I mean,
it's like whatever I have in my hands is what's going to work. You have such a deep, I think there's probably not a person who knows you who wouldn't think about a Jazzmaster when they think about you. And rightfully so.
Well, it is my favorite electric guitar for me.
Do you still have your first Jazzmaster?
Oh yeah, the one I bought from Mike Watt.
That's
my main guitar. I don't have it in New York. It's in Chicago. And I didn't know I was not going to see it for months, but I haven't seen it since March. But it's there. It's safe. I have a 59 in Brooklyn that's really nice, and it was beat to crap before I bought it, so I just beat it even more to crap. So it's pretty distressed, and it's functional. But the Watt one is special. It just sounds so good to me.
That was the first Jazzmaster that you ever bought.
Yeah, I bought it from Watt in '95. I played a Jaguar for years before that.
Right.
And I still have that. It's a 66 Jaguar. When you saw me with the Singers, that's what I was playing. I'm at the Singers with the trio in Seattle. That's what I was playing. It's a 66 Jaguar.
Is this, pardon my ignorance on this, is the scale length of a Jaguar and a Jazzmaster different?
Yeah, Jazzmaster is more scale length. And also one less fret.
So it's 21?
Yeah. So if you got to get that high D, I got to switch to a Jaguar. But I love Jaguars, but they're much different feel, and specifically the pickups and the pickup switching is so vast on a Jaguar, and all those beautiful, needly, steely, twangy tones. The Jazzmaster is relatively simple by comparison, and those pickups, they have more oomph on a Jazzmaster, and they hum like crazy. So I actually have a couple of fake Jazzmasters, like Kitmasters, that have these Seymour Duncan PAFs that look like Jazzmaster pickups. And of course, they don't sound the same, but they sound kind of like humbuckers, and they don't hum. It's interesting to me that so many of my improviser friends, in most of whom are in New York, can't take any noise coming out of the pickups. And I also have offered this, like my friend John Woody, who does Mastery bridges and tremolos. He put this guitar together for me years ago out of a vintage body that was lying around Willie's American Guitars forever, and a kit neck and vintage tremolo and Mastery bridge and these PAFs. And I offer, when I go and record with people, I usually bring a guitar that hums and a guitar that doesn't hum. And people just love the sound of that guitar. and so it's kind of become my main recording guitar when I'm doing stuff in New York, which could be, playing mostly with some singer songwriter nobody's heard of that's a friend of a friend, and I'm going to play on 2 or 3 songs by this person, and that guitar really gets a lot of use. And I'm surprised how many people just can't take 60 cycle hum.
I mean, my favorite pickups are P90s, and you can't
They
get
hum.
those things to shut up.
No, but I use a volume pedal all the time, so I can defeat hum when I'm not playing. But really, it's surprising, and I'm interested in how timbrally, just when they hear the tone of that guitar with the Duncan PAFs, the people just say, "I like the sound of that. I'll use that one." I go, "Okay, great. Whatever works."
Right. Um, you know, I need to get back to my house because I gotta run people around.
And it's getting late. I need to eat some dinner.
You do need to eat some dinner.
Yeah, what time is it? How long have we been talking?
It's a little after 8. We've been going for a couple hours.
Good God, man. Okay.
Good
Well,
God.
I hope that when you go home, you have power.
I don't believe that we do, which is one of the reasons I need to get home. I just saw it come across my screen. My wife was like, "I can't wait till you get home." I mean, when you don't have electricity upstate and you're on a well, you don't have
You don't have water.
you don't have water.
Yeah,
So
we had this experience where we were in the woods.
yeah,
I imagine it's the same here. I haven't even asked the people where our water's coming from.
I went and filled a 5-gallon bucket with water at the fire station because there's a generator there.
Wow.
And so that if we go to the bathroom, we can refill the toilet tank and flush it down. But I spent part of my youth and part of my adult life in California and lived through a couple of droughts there, so I know the whole if it's yellow, let it mellow routine.
Yep, I do too. 50 plus years in Southern California. Yeah. You don't wash your car, you don't water your lawn, and you don't flush down your urine.
Yeah,
It's really bad.
right. Unless it's asparagus soup. You can flush that.
Yeah, I think you should. Yeah, absolutely. Or B12 vitamins.
I can't
Okay.
believe that I was too nervous to talk to you the half a dozen times that I've been around, and I really appreciate how open and candid and frankly how talkative you are. I love it.
I'm a gabber.
You're the ideal podcast guest. And I'm excited for the new album. I'm gonna I don't have internet at home, but perhaps before I leave here, I'm gonna go watch the video.
Check it out. Did you ever see the video that my wife Yuka and I have a duo called Cup, and we made a video for one of the songs on the Cup album, which we both sing on, and the song was not really representative. Typically, of course, our stuff, hers as well, is rather all over the place. But it's called Spinning Creature by Cup. And that was like another hilarious shoestring video thing. But we're in the video, lip syncing and everything. So if people think I'm some serious jazz dude every second of my life, it's not exactly the case. Or like a heavy rocker, I guess. Some people think I'm just a heavy rocker. And I do love to rock. And I do love to improvise, and I do love jazz, and I do love rock. But the song Spinning Creature is kind of Brazilian music inspired, and I play acoustic 12-string on it, and we sing, and it's pretty much, I'd say, 80% about our dog, and our dog is in the video.
Amazing. I lived in this house in Seattle, and Chibo Mato played at Bumbershoot one year, and we had at my house a big after party, and we had like a DJ set up in our living room, and they all showed up there, and I swear she pulled a DJ set at our after party.
It's likely either she or Miho could have done that, or together they could have done it, I suppose. Was Sean Lennon playing bass with them on tour?
He
Probably.
was, yeah.
Yep.
And you know, he was definitely a distraction for folks because people thought they were, you know, yeah, Sean Lennon, and he sat on the porch and started playing acoustic guitar. The whole place just about stopped. It was.
Well, Sean is one of the most remarkable people, and not just musically talented. He's just one of these really super astute, very, very intelligent, and sort of incisive intellect, and plays all the rhythm section instruments, sings, writes songs, and is an exceptional visual artist as well.
I saw him do the thing with Les.
Oh yeah, I've never got to see them live. I'm so bummed. I was always touring, going another direction.
Oh man, it was great.
I interviewed them for some magazine. I can't remember what it was for the first record. I actually was asked to interview them, which was really daunting. These interviews can be hard, I learned, but it worked out.
You know, you could start a podcast, and then you really don't have to have your shit together. You just show up and start talking.
Okay, right. And it's talk to me, and I'm like, never get to get a word in edgewise.
No, it's great. That's a perfect conversation for me.
Okay. Well, listen, get back to your home, please. Be safe.
Thank you so much for giving me so much time.
Thank you for your interest. And yeah, really, don't be scared. You can talk to me. You can talk to me anytime. Okay, man.
Hey, have a great night.
Okay. Good luck with everything.
Thanks. You too.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.